Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. Ryland Grady leaned back in his ergonomic office chair, fingers flying across the keyboard as he put the finishing touches on his latest consulting report. The San Francisco skyline stretched out beyond his window, a testament to the tech empire he'd helped build over the last decade. At 35, he was at the top of his game, a self-made millionaire whose sharp mind and relentless work ethic had catapulted him from humble beginnings to the upper echelons of Silicon Valley. As he hit send on the email to his latest Fortune 500 client, Ryland allowed himself a small smile of satisfaction. Another seven-figure payday in the bank. Not that anyone would guess it to look at him. His simple button-down and jeans were a far cry from the flashy designer suits favored by many of his colleagues. The battered Ford pickup in the parking garage stood out like a sore thumb among the sea of Teslas and BMWs. Ryland preferred it that way. He'd learned the value of humility and discretion from his mother back in Boise. The memory of her exhausted face as she came home from another double shift was seared into his mind. They'd never had much, but she'd given him everything he needed to succeed. "You don't need to show off to prove your worth, she'd always said. Let your actions speak for themselves. It was a lesson he'd taken to heart, even as his bank account had grown to eye-watering proportions. What was the point of flaunting wealth when it couldn't buy the things that really mattered? The ping of his phone interrupted his musings. A text from Kim. "Dinner at the Andersons tonight. Don't forget." Ryland sighed, a hint of tension creeping into his shoulders. These dinners with Kim's friends always left him drained. He much preferred quiet nights at home with his wife, but she'd been pushing for more couple time lately. Probably another attempt to nudge him towards a more lavish lifestyle. As he packed up his laptop, Ryland's mind drifted to the early days of their relationship. Kim had been a breath of fresh air, vibrant, ambitious, with a zest for life that pulled him out of his workaholic shell. Her wide-eyed enthusiasm when he'd proposed still brought a warmth to his chest. But lately, that sparkle had dimmed, replaced by a restlessness he couldn't quite pin down. The drive home was quicker than usual, Silicon Valley traffic mercifully light for once. As Ryland pulled into the driveway of their modest suburban home, he spotted Kim through the window, pacing back and forth on her phone. Even from a distance, he could see the agitation in her movements. He barely had time to close the front door before Kim rounded on him, her perfectly manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm against her phone case. "There you are. I was starting to think you'd forgotten." Ryland raised an eyebrow. "I'm home an hour earlier than usual, Kim." She waved a dismissive hand. "Well, we need to leave in 30 minutes if we want to make it on time. The Andersons just moved to that new development in Los Altos Hills, remember?" "Right," Ryland said, trying to keep the weariness out of his voice. "Let me just grab a quick shower and change." Kim's eyes narrowed as she took in his worn jeans and scuffed work boots. "Please tell me you're not planning to wear that ratty flannel shirt again. This is an important dinner. Jason just made partner at his law firm. We need to make a good impression." Ryland bit back a retort. There was no point in reminding her that his ratty wardrobe had never stopped him from closing multi-million-dollar deals. Instead, he simply nodded and headed for the stairs. "Oh, and honey," Kim called after him, "maybe we could take my car tonight? The truck is a bit conspicuous in that neighborhood." Ryland felt his jaw clench, but forced out a neutral sure before disappearing into their bedroom. As the hot water of the shower pounded against his back, he tried to shake off the irritation. Kim didn't mean any harm. She just wanted what was best for them, even if her idea of best sometimes felt suffocating. 25 minutes later, they were cruising down the 280 in Kim's sleek Audi, purchased on Ryland's dime but registered in her name. He had to admit, the leather seats were a lot more comfortable than his truck's worn upholstery. Kim chatted animatedly about the latest neighborhood gossip, filling him in on who was feuding with whom and which couples were on the verge of divorce. Ryland made the appropriate noises of interest, but his mind was already dreading the endless small talk ahead. The Andersons' new home was exactly as ostentatious as Ryland had feared. A sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion perched on a hillside, complete with manicured gardens and a fountain gurgling in the circular driveway. He could practically feel Kim vibrating with envy beside him. Can you believe this place? She whispered as they walked up to the ornate front door. Jason said they got it for a steal at only $8 million. Imagine living somewhere like this. Rylan chose not to point out that he could buy this house 10 times over without blinking. Instead, he plastered on a polite smile as the doors swung open to reveal their hosts. Kim, Rylan, so glad you could make it. Melissa Anderson air-kissed them both, the scent of expensive perfume lingering in her wake. Her husband Jason stood behind her, all white teeth and California tan. Come in, come in. Melissa ushered them inside. Dinner's almost ready, but Jason was just about to give everyone the grand tour. You have to see the wine cellar, it's to die for. The next hour passed in a blur of high ceilings, marble countertops, and artisanal this and that. Rylan nodded and smiled at all the appropriate moments, but he couldn't help noticing the way Kim's eyes lit up at each new extravagance. The longing in her gaze was impossible to miss. Finally, they settled around an enormous dining table that probably cost more than some people's yearly salary. Conversation flowed freely, lubricated by bottles of wine that Jason was all too eager to show off. So, Rylan, Jason said between bites of Wagyu beef, Kim tells us you're in tech consulting? How's business these days? Rylan shrugged, keeping his tone modest. Can't complain. Plenty of work to go around in the valley. I'll bet. Jason chuckled. Though I imagine the real money's in starting your own company. Ever thought about making the leap from consultant to founder? Before Rylan could answer, Kim jumped in. Oh, Rylan's not really the entrepreneurial type. He likes the stability of consulting. There was a hint of something in her voice. Disappointment? Embarrassment? Nothing wrong with that, Jason said smoothly, though Rylan caught the patronizing edge to his smile. We can't all be risk-takers. The conversation moved on, but Rylan found himself withdrawing further. He watched as Kim laughed too loudly at Jason's jokes, her eyes sparkling in a way they hadn't around him in months. When Melissa started talking about their upcoming trip to the Maldives, he saw the naked envy on his wife's face. It was nearing midnight by the time they made their goodbyes. The drive home was quiet, tension thrumming between them like a live wire. They seem happy, Kim said finally, her voice carefully neutral. Rylan grunted noncommittally. Did you see that kitchen? I bet Melissa loves cooking in there. Remember when we talked about remodeling ours? Our kitchen works just fine, Rylan said, perhaps a bit more sharply than he'd intended. Kim's lips pressed into a thin line. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but wouldn't it be nice to have something a little more modern? We've been in this house for 5 years now. Don't you think it's time for an upgrade? Rylan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. We don't need an upgrade, Kim. We have everything we need. Need, sure, Kim muttered. But what about want? Don't you ever want more than just getting by? The words hit Rylan like a slap. Getting by? They lived in a $1.5 million home in one of the most expensive real estate markets in the country. Kim drove a luxury car, had a closet full of designer clothes. How could she possibly think they were just getting by? But of course, she had no idea about the true extent of their wealth. Rylan had always kept his finances private, not wanting money to change the dynamic of their relationship. Now he was starting to wonder if that had been a mistake. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence. By the time they pulled into the garage, Rylan's patience was hanging by a thread. I'm going to bed, he announced as soon as they were inside. Early meeting tomorrow. Kim's face fell. Already? I thought maybe we could talk about... Not tonight, Kim. Rylan cut her off, already heading for the stairs. I'm beat. He felt a twinge of guilt at the hurt look on her face, but he pushed it aside. He needed time to think, to figure out how they'd ended up so far apart without him even realizing it. Sleep was elusive that night. Rylan tossed and turned, Kim's words echoing in his head. When he finally drifted off, his dreams were a confused jumble of dollar signs and disappointed faces. The next few weeks passed in a haze of work and stilted conversations. Rylan threw himself into his consulting, taking on even more clients in an effort to distract himself from the growing distance between him and Kim. She, in turn, seemed to be spending more and more time with her real estate colleagues, coming home later and later with forced smiles and vague explanations. It all came to a head on a quiet Sunday evening. They were having dinner takeout, because neither of them had felt like cooking. The TV droned softly in the background, filling the silence that had become all too common lately. "So," Kim said, pushing her lo mein around her plate, "Stacy's having a little get-together next weekend. Just a casual thing with some of the girls from the office. You don't mind if I go, do you?" Rylan shrugged. "Why would I mind? You don't need my permission, Kim." She flinched slightly at his tone. "I know that. I don't want you to feel like I'm avoiding you, or anything. Are you?" The words were out before he could stop them. Kim's eyes widened. "What? No, of course not. Why would you think that?" Rylan set down his chopsticks, suddenly not hungry. "Come on, Kim. We've barely spoken in weeks. Every time I come home, you're either out or on your way out. What am I supposed to think?" "I've been busy with work," she said defensively. "You know how it is? The market's been crazy lately, right?" Rylan said flatly. "Because you've been so successful closing deals." As soon as the words left his mouth, he knew he'd gone too far. Kim recoiled as if he'd slapped her, hurt and anger warring in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" she demanded. Rylan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." "No, I want to know what you meant by that," Kim pressed. "Do you think I'm not working hard enough? That I'm just playing at having a career?" "That's not what I said," Rylan protested, but Kim's on a roll now. "You know what? Not all of us can be big-shot consultants making six figures. Some of us are still trying to build something for ourselves. But I guess that's not good enough for you, is it?" Rylan felt his own temper rising. "When have I ever said that, Kim? When have I ever made you feel like what you do isn't enough? You don't have to say it." Kim shot back. "It's in every disapproving look when I talk about work. Every time you brush off my ideas for improving our life. God forbid we actually enjoy the money you make instead of living like we're still struggling college students." "There's nothing wrong with living within our means," Rylan said tightly. "Just because we don't flaunt every penny doesn't mean we're struggling." Kim let out a bitter laugh. "Our means? Rylan, we live in a nice house in a good neighborhood. That's great. But you act like splurging on anything beyond the basics is some kind of moral failing. Would it kill you to want something more? To actually enjoy life a little?" "I do enjoy life," Rylan insisted. "I enjoy our life. At least I thought I did. Apparently, that's not enough for you anymore." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Kim's face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "You know what? Maybe it's not," she said quietly. Maybe we want different things. Maybe we're not as compatible as we thought." Rylan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "What are you saying, Kim?" She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm saying, I don't know. I need some time to think, to figure out what I really want." "Kim," Rylan started, but she was already heading for the door. "I'm going to stay with Stacy for a few days," she said, not meeting his eyes. "I think we both need some space to figure things out." Before Rylan could formulate a response, she was gone, the sound of the front door closing echoing through the suddenly empty house. He sat there for a long time, staring at the half-eaten takeout containers and wondering how they'd gotten to this point. Part of him wanted to run after Kim, to tell her everything about his real income, about the millions sitting in offshore accounts. But another part, the part that remembered his mother's lessons about the true value of things, held him back. If money was all it took to make Kim happy, to make her stay, was that really a marriage worth saving? The next few days passed in a blur. Rylan went through the motions at work, his usual sharp focus dulled by the constant replay of their argument in his head. He found himself reaching for his phone a dozen times a day, composing messages to Kim only to delete them unsent. On the fourth day, he came home to find Kim waiting for him, a small suitcase by her feet. His heart leapt for a moment, thinking she'd come to her senses. But the grim set of her mouth told a different story. "We need to talk," she said, and Rylan's world came crashing down. What followed was quite possibly the most surreal conversation of Rylan's life. Kim, her voice alternating between anger and tears, laid out all her frustrations. How she felt stifled by their modest lifestyle. How she'd watched her friends advance in their careers and upgrade their lives while she felt stuck in place. How she'd come to resent what she saw as Rylan's lack of ambition. "I can't do this anymore, Ree," she said finally. "I thought I could be happy with a simple life, but I'm not. I want more. I deserve more. Rylan listened in stunned silence, a maelstrom of emotions churning inside him. Hurt, anger, disbelief, and underneath it all, a cold, hard nugget of resolve. "So that's it," he said when she'd finished. "You're walking away from 5 years of marriage because I don't make enough money for you?" Kim flinched. "It's not just about the money. It's about feeling like we're moving forward, like we're building something together. But you're content to just exist. I need more than that." Rylan nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. "I see. And I suppose you think you'll find that more out there somewhere." "I have to try," Kim said, not meeting his eyes. "I'm still young. I have time to start over, to find someone who shares my goals." "Someone richer, you mean?" Rylan said flatly. Kim's silence was all the answer he needed. "All right," he said, surprising himself with how calm he sounded. "If that's what you want, I won't stand in your way. We'll get a quick, clean divorce. No fuss, no muss." Kim looked up, startled. You're not going to fight this?" Rylan shook his head, his voice steady. "What's the point? You've made it clear what you want, and it's not me. Not unless I suddenly turn into some flashy millionaire overnight." He watched the flicker of regret in Kim's eyes, quickly replaced by determination. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers. We can do this amicably, right?" "Of course," Rylan said, his tone neutral. "I'll have Carla handle things on my end. She'll make sure everything's fair." Kim's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Rylan's high-powered lawyer friend, but she didn't comment. Instead, she picked up her suitcase, hesitating for a moment. "I am sorry, Ree," she said softly. "I do love you. I just—" "Not enough," Rylan finished for her. "I get it. Go on, Kim. Your new life is waiting." As the door closed behind her, Rylan let out a long, slow breath. He walked to the window, watching as Kim's car pulled out of the driveway for the last time. A mix of emotions swirled within him. Anger, hurt, a touch of relief, and underneath it all, a steely determination. He pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number. "Carla? It's Rylan. I need your help with something. How fast can you process a divorce?" The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of paperwork and terse meetings. True to his word, Rylan kept things civil, agreeing to a modest settlement that wouldn't reveal the true extent of his wealth. Kim, eager to start her new life, didn't push for more. It was during one of these meetings that Rylan overheard a snippet of conversation between Kim and her friend Stacy. They were huddled in a corner of the lawyer's office, speaking in hushed tones. "I'm telling you, Kim, this guy is perfect," Stacy was saying. "Nate Cole. He's got money, style, everything you've been looking for. And he's been asking about you." Rylan turned away, his jaw clenching. So Kim had already lined up her next target. He shouldn't have been surprised, but the speed of it still stung. The day the divorce was finalized, Rylan found himself alone in the house he'd once shared with Kim. He wandered from room to room, memories pressing in from all sides. In the kitchen, he paused, remembering Kim's complaints about wanting to remodel. With a sudden burst of energy, he grabbed a notepad and started sketching out plans for a complete overhaul. Why not? It was his house now. He could do whatever he wanted with it. As he worked, Rylan felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. For years, he'd been holding back, trying to maintain a facade of modest success to keep Kim grounded. Now he was free to live as he chose, to enjoy the fruits of his labor without guilt or explanation. His phone buzzed with a text from Carla. "It's done. You're officially a free man." Rylan smiled, a plan forming in his mind. He'd give Kim exactly what she wanted, a glimpse of the wealthy lifestyle she'd been craving. But by the time she realized what she'd thrown away, it would be far too late. He opened his laptop, firing off emails to his financial advisors. It was time to start making some very visible investments. Let the rumors start flying about the suddenly successful Rylan Grady. He'd make sure they reached Kim's ears, but always secondhand, always just out of reach. As night fell, Rylan stood at his window, looking out over the Silicon Valley skyline. He raised a glass of whiskey in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to sweet revenge, and to the lesson Kim was about to learn the hard way. Be careful what you wish for. Little did he know, the wheels of fate were already in motion. Across town, Kim was on her first date with Nate Cole, dazzled by his charm and apparent wealth. She had no idea of the house of cards she was walking into, or of the storm brewing on the horizon. Ryland's phone buzzed again. A news alert about a rising star in the tech world him. He smiled, a cold, determined glint in his eye. The game was on. Weeks had passed since the divorce, and Ryland found himself settling into a new routine. His days were filled with work, his evenings with the quiet satisfaction of finally living life on his own terms. The kitchen remodel was well underway, and he'd started making strategic appearances at high-profile tech events, carefully cultivating his new public image. One crisp morning, Ryland was enjoying his coffee on the patio when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, eyebrow raising at the unfamiliar number. Curiosity got the better of him. Ryland Grady speaking. He answered, voice neutral. Ryland? The voice on the other end was shaky, uncertain. It took him a moment to place it. Kim. He fought to keep the surprise out of his tone. What do you want? Can we talk? Please? I need to see you. The desperation in her voice was palpable. Ryland's first instinct was to hang up, but a cold curiosity took hold. This could be interesting. Fine, he said flatly. The cafe on 3rd Street. 1 hour. He arrived early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. Right on time, Kim walked in, and Ryland had to stifle a gasp. She looked terrible-haired, disheveled, dark circles under her eyes, designer clothes wrinkled and unkempt. This was not the polished, ambitious woman who had walked out on him. Kim slid into the seat across from him, hands fidgeting nervously with her purse. Thank you for meeting me, she said softly. Ryland leaned back, face impassive. What do you want, Kim? She took a deep breath. I made a huge mistake, Ree. Everything's falling apart. Nate, he's not who I thought he was. We're drowning in debt. And I miss the stability we had. I miss you. Ryland's eyebrows shot up. Stability? That's rich, coming from you. Wasn't our life too boring, too modest for your tastes? Kim flinched. I know. I was stupid. I thought I wanted all that flash and excitement. But now, she trailed off, looking lost. Now what? Ryland pressed, a hint of steel in his voice. You thought you'd come crawling back, and I'd welcome you with open arms? No. I hoped. Godry, I don't know what I hoped. Tears welled in her eyes. I just know I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from you. Ryland studied her for a long moment. Part of him, a part he wasn't proud of, relished seeing her so broken. But mostly he felt nothing. The woman in front of him was a stranger, one he no longer had any desire to know. Kim, he said slowly, I make $1.5 million a year. The color drained from Kim's face. What? No, that's impossible. You never. I didn't think it mattered. Ryland cut her off, voice cold. You left without ever really knowing me, Kim. Without ever bothering to look beyond the surface. Kim's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. She looked like she'd been slapped. But why didn't you ever say anything? Why did we live so modestly? Ryland's laugh was without humor. Because money isn't everything, Kim. I thought you understood that once. Clearly I was wrong. We can fix this, can't we? Kim leaned forward, voice trembling. I was wrong. I was so stupid. I just didn't know. Please, Ree, give me another chance. Ryland looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the desperation, the regret, and he felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a bone-deep weariness. You already made your choice, Kim, he said quietly. I'm not a second option. I'm not a safety net. And I'm certainly not a fool. Before Kim could respond, a man's voice cut through the tension. Kim? What's going on here? Ryland looked up to see a tall, well-dressed man approaching their table. Even without the introduction, he would have pegged this as Nate Cole. The flashy watch, the too-white smile, it all screamed new money and bad decisions. Kim's eyes widened in panic. Nate! This isn't, we were just... Ryland stood, gathering his coat. I'll let you two figure it out, he said calmly. He turned to Nate, offering a bland smile. Good luck. You're going to need it. As he walked away, He heard Kim's frantic explanations and Nate's increasingly angry responses. He didn't look back. The encounter left Ryland feeling oddly energized. He threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, taking on high-profile clients and making waves in the tech world. His name started appearing in industry publications, whispers of his success spreading through Silicon Valley like wildfire. It was at one of these industry events that he met Chloe Adams. She was giving a presentation on innovative software development techniques, and Ryland found himself captivated not just by her ideas, but by her down-to-earth demeanor. After her talk, he approached her at the networking mixer. "Impressive presentation," he said, offering his hand. Ryland Grady. Chloe's handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Chloe Adams. And thanks. I was worried I'd put everyone to sleep with all that technical jargon." Ryland chuckled. "Far from it. Your ideas on agile development are fascinating. I'd love to hear more about how you're implementing them in real-world scenarios." They fell into easy conversation, talking shop and swapping industry stories. Ryland was surprised to find himself genuinely enjoying the interaction. It had been a long time since he'd connected with someone on an intellectual level like this. As the evening wound down, Ryland found himself reluctant to end the conversation. "Listen," he said, "I know this is a bit forward, but would you like to grab coffee sometime? Continue this discussion in a less corporate setting." Chloe tilted her head, considering. "You know what? I'd like that. But full disclosure, I'm not interested in climbing any corporate ladders or latching onto the next big thing. If that's what you're after, I'll save us both some time." Ryland felt a genuine smile spread across his face. "Chloe, that might be the most refreshing thing I've heard all year." Their coffee date turned into dinner, which turned into long walks discussing everything from coding philosophies to favorite books. Ryland found himself opening up in a way he never had with Kim, sharing his background, his mother's influence, his real feelings about wealth and success. Chloe, in turn, shared her own story, her passion for coding, her desire to make a difference in the world through technology. She was brilliant, kind, and refreshingly unimpressed by displays of wealth. Weeks turned into months, and Ryland realized he was happier than he'd been in years. He and Chloe complemented each other perfectly, challenging and supporting one another in equal measure. One lazy Sunday morning, as they lounged on Ryland's patio enjoying breakfast, Chloe brought up a topic they'd danced around for weeks. "So," she said, setting down her coffee mug, "are we going to talk about the elephant in the room?" Ryland raised an eyebrow. "Which elephant would that be?" Chloe rolled her eyes fondly. "The one where you're clearly some kind of secret millionaire, but you live like a normal human being. Don't get me wrong, I love that about you. But I'm curious about the story there." Ryland was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. Then, slowly, he began to tell her everything about his childhood, about Kim, about his decision to keep his wealth private. When he finished, Chloe reached across the table, taking his hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said softly. "It can't have been easy." Ryland squeezed her hand. "Oddly enough, that's how I know it's different. It's real." Chloe smiled, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Well, in that case, I have a confession to make too." Ryland's heart skipped a beat. "Oh, I've been secretly hoping you'd offer to fund my startup idea," she said, face serious. Then she burst out laughing at Ryland's shocked expression. "I'm kidding. God, your face." Ryland joined in her laughter, feeling lighter than he had in years. This, he realized, was what he'd been missing all along. Not just a partner, but a true equal. Someone who saw him for who he was, not what he had. As their laughter subsided, Chloe's expression turned thoughtful. "All joking aside, I do have some ideas for socially responsible tech initiatives. Not looking for handouts, mind you, but if you ever want to collaborate." Ryland grinned. "I'd love to hear about them." "Partners?" He held out his hand. Chloe took it, her smile radiant. "Partners?" Meanwhile, across town, Kim's life was unraveling at an alarming rate. The cracks in Nate's facade were turning into gaping chasms, and she found herself trapped in a nightmare of her own making. It started with little things, bills arriving marked "final notice," hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when she entered the room. But soon, the truth became impossible to ignore. "What do you mean, the business is failing?" Kim's voice echoed through their penthouse apartment. You said we were doing great. Nate paced the room, running his hands through his hair. I thought we could turn it around. The investors were supposed to come through. But now? Now what? Kim demanded. Nate's shoulders slumped. Now we're broke. Worse than broke. We're in debt up to our eyeballs. Kim felt the room spin. This couldn't be happening. Not again. But the cars, the apartment, our lifestyle, all smoke and mirrors, Nate said bitterly. Leased cars, borrowed money. I thought if we looked successful, we'd become successful. Fake it till you make it, right? Kim sank onto the couch, head in her hands. Oh God. Oh God. What have I done? As the days passed, their situation went from bad to worse. The penthouse was repossessed, the cars taken away. They moved into a tiny apartment in a part of town Kim had once turned her nose up at. She tried reaching out to her old friends, but word of their downfall had spread quickly. Doors that had once been open to her were now firmly shut. Even Stacy, who had introduced her to Nate, wouldn't return her calls. In desperation, Kim tried to restart her real estate career. But her reputation was in tatters, and no one was willing to take a chance on her. One night, after another fruitless day of job hunting, Kim found herself staring at her phone. Ryland's number glowed on the screen, a beacon of hope in her darkening world. Her finger hovered over the call button. Don't even think about it. Nate's voice startled her. He stood in the doorway, eyes hard. You made your choice, Kim. You're with me now, for better or worse. Kim looked at him, really looked at him. Gone was the charming, confident man she'd thought she married. In his place stood a bitter, angry stranger. Is this really what you want? She asked softly. Nate's laugh was harsh. Want? Since when does what we want matter? This is what we've got, Kim. Better get used to it. As he stalked out of the room, Kim turned back to her phone. With trembling fingers, she pressed call. It went straight to voicemail. You've reached Ryland Grady. I'm unavailable to take your call. If this is a business matter, please contact my assistant. If this is a personal call, well, you probably shouldn't have this number. Kim's breath caught in her throat. Even his voicemail sounded different. Confident, successful. Everything she'd once thought she wanted. Ryland, she whispered into the phone. I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. Please call me back. I need help. She ended the call, tears streaming down her face. But deep down, she knew there would be no rescue, no second chance. She'd made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Across town, Ryland's phone buzzed with a missed call notification. He glanced at it, saw Kim's name, and without a moment's hesitation, pressed block number. Everything okay? Chloe asked, looking up from her laptop where she'd been working on their latest project. Ryland smiled, a genuine, contented smile. Yeah, he said. Everything's perfect. As he turned back to their work, Ryland felt the last vestiges of his old life fall away. The future stretched out before him, bright with possibility. And for the first time in a long time, he was excited to see where it would lead. Ryland sat in his home office, fingers flying across the keyboard as he put the finishing touches on his latest project. The warm glow of success surrounded him, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing elsewhere in Silicon Valley. A knock on the door interrupted his focus. Chloe poked her head in, a concerned look on her face. Have you seen the news? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Ryland leaned back in his chair, stretching. No, I've been buried in code all morning. What's up? Chloe walked in, tablet in hand. It's about Nate Cole. You know, Kim's new husband? His company just filed for bankruptcy. It's all over the tech blogs. A cold smile played at the corners of Ryland's mouth. Is that so? How unfortunate for him. Chloe studied him closely. Ryland, you wouldn't have had anything to do with this, would you? Ryland met her gaze steadily. Let's just say I made some strategic moves in the business world. If those moves happen to impact Mr. Cole's company, well, that's just the nature of the game, isn't it? Ryland, Chloe said, her tone a mix of admiration and concern. What exactly did you do? Ryland stood, walking to the window that overlooked the San Francisco skyline. I may have used some of my connections to ensure that Cole's company was blacklisted from key financial networks. made it nearly impossible for him to secure the funding he needed to keep his house of cards standing. Chloe's eyes widened. That's ruthless. Ryland turned to face her, his expression hard. It's business, Chloe. Cole was running a scam, preying on people's desire for a flashy lifestyle. He just picked the wrong mark this time, and it has nothing to do with the fact that he married your ex-wife. Chloe pressed. Ryland's laugh was without humor. Oh, it has everything to do with that. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Kim made her choice. Now they both get to live with the consequences. Chloe was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she nodded slowly. I get it. I don't know if I agree with it, but I get it. Just be careful, okay? Don't let this consume you. Ryland's expression softened as he looked at her. I won't. This is the end of it, I promise. From here on out, it's all about our future. Across town, the fallout from Nate's business collapse was reaching a fever pitch. Kim paced their small apartment, phone pressed to her ear. What do you mean? There's nothing left, she hissed into the receiver. There has to be something. Nate's voice crackled through the speaker, defeated and angry. It's gone, Kim. All of it. The business, our savings, everything. We're wiped out. Kim felt the room spin. She collapsed onto the worn couch, her free hand clutching at her hair. How could this happen? You promised me. You said we'd be set for life. I thought we would be. Nate shouted back. But someone's been working against us, Kim. Blocking every move, cutting off every lifeline. It's like they knew exactly where to hit us. A chill ran down Kim's spine. She thought back to her last conversation with Ryland, the cold look in his eyes when he revealed his true wealth. Could he have? Nate, she said slowly, I think I might know who's behind this. What? Who? Nate demanded. Kim took a deep breath. My ex-husband, Ryland. He's got more money and influence than I ever realized. And he's not the forgiving type. The line went quiet for a long moment. When Nate spoke again, his voice was low and dangerous. You're telling me this now? After everything's gone to hell? Jesus Christ, Kim. What else don't I know about you? The line went dead. Kim stared at the phone in her hand, tears welling in her eyes. How had it all gone so wrong? Days passed, and their situation grew increasingly desperate. Bill collectors called constantly. The refrigerator stood empty more often than not. Kim found herself doing something she never thought she'd have to do again, scanning the want ads for any job that would take her. One evening, as she sat at their small kitchen table, circling potential leads in the newspaper, Nate stormed in. His eyes were wild, his clothes disheveled. Pack your bags, he barked, heading for the bedroom. Kim jumped up, following him. What? Nate, what's going on? Nate was throwing clothes haphazardly into a suitcase. We're leaving. Tonight. I've got a lead on a fresh start in L.A. An old buddy of mine says he can get us set up. Kim's heart raced. Leave? But what about our lives here? Our friends? Our Nate whirled on her, eyes blazing. What friends, Kim? What life? It's all gone. And it's all because of you and your rich ex-husband. Kim recoiled as if she'd been slapped. That's not fair. I didn't know. You should have known. Nate roared. You were married to the guy. God, I was such an idiot. I thought I'd landed a meal ticket, but instead I got stuck with a clueless gold digger who couldn't even pick the right mark. The words hung in the air between them, ugly and raw. Kim felt something inside her snap. Is that all I am to you? She asked, her voice quiet but steel-edged. A meal ticket? Nate deflated slightly, running a hand through his hair. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I'm scared, Kim. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it. Kim looked at him, really looked at him. Gone was the confident, charming man she'd fallen for. In his place stood a desperate, broken shell. She made a decision. Go, she said softly. Nate blinked. What? Go to L.A., make your fresh start. But I won't be coming with you. Kim, don't be stupid, Nate pleaded. We're in this together. For better or worse, remember? Kim shook her head, a sad smile on her face. No, Nate. We're not. We never were. We were just two people using each other to get what we thought we wanted. But it's time to face reality. It's over. Nate stared at her for a long moment. Then, without another word, he zipped up his suitcase and walked out the door. Kim listened as his footsteps faded down the hallway, waited for the sound of the elevator doors closing. Then, alone in the quiet apartment, she allowed herself to cry. Weeks passed. Kim threw herself into job hunting with a desperation born of true need. She swallowed her pride, taking a position as a receptionist at a small real estate firm, a far cry from her dreams of being a top agent. But it was a start. She downsized even further, moving into a tiny studio apartment in a less desirable part of town. Every day was a struggle, but slowly, she began to rebuild. One afternoon, as she was walking home from work, she spotted a familiar figure coming out of a high-end restaurant. Rylan, looking sharp in a tailored suit, laughing with a group of well-dressed executives. And on his arm, a woman Kim didn't recognize, pretty, in an understated way, her smile genuine as she looked up at Rylan. Kim felt a pang in her chest, not of jealousy, exactly, but of regret for what might have been. She watched as Rylan helped the woman into a waiting car, his hand lingering on her back. He looked happy, truly happy, in a way Kim realized she'd never seen him before. Before she could stop herself, Kim called out, "Rylan!" He turned, his eyes scanning the street before landing on her. The warmth in his expression cooled instantly. "Kim," he said, his voice neutral. "This is a surprise." Kim approached cautiously, suddenly aware of her shabby work clothes and scuffed shoes. I saw you, and just, how are you?" Rylan's eyebrow raised slightly. "I'm doing well. Very well, in fact. And you?" Kim forced a smile. "Oh, getting by. Starting over." Rylan nodded, his expression unreadable. "I heard about Nate's business troubles. Shame that." The lack of sincerity in his voice was palpable. Kim felt a flicker of anger. "Did you have something to do with that?" she asked, her voice low. Rylan's smile was cold. "The tech world can be cutthroat, Kim. Nate should have done his due diligence before trying to play with the big boys." "You ruined us," Kim hissed. "Was it your plan all along? To watch us crash and burn?" "I didn't ruin anyone," Rylan replied calmly. "I simply allowed the consequences of your choices to play out. You wanted flash and excitement, Kim. Well, this is where that path led." Kim felt tears pricking at her eyes. "I made a mistake, Ree. I know that now. I'm sorry. For everything." For a moment, something flickered in Rylan's eyes, a hint of the man she'd once known. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cool indifference. "Your apology is noted," he said flatly. "But it changes nothing. You made your choice, Kim. Now you get to live with it, just like I've had to live with mine." "Rylan, please," Kim pleaded. "I'm struggling. I could use some help just to get back on my feet." Rylan's laugh was without humor. "Help? From me? I'm not your safety net, Kim. I'm not your second choice. I'm not anything to you anymore. And that's exactly how I wanted to stay." He turned to go, then paused, looking back at her. "Word of advice? Stop looking for someone else to solve your problems. Stand on your own 2 feet for once. It might do you some good." With that, he walked away, leaving Kim standing alone on the sidewalk, the gulf between their lives never more apparent. Back at home, Rylan found Chloe waiting for him, a concerned look on her face. "I saw you talking to Kim," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Rylan sank onto the couch beside her, suddenly feeling drained. "Yeah, I'm fine. It was strange, seeing her like that." Chloe took his hand. "Do you regret it? What you did to Nate's company?" Rylan was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he shook his head. "No, I don't. They made their choices. I just made sure those choices had consequences. And now," Chloe pressed, "is it over?" Rylan looked at her, really looked at her. He saw concern in her eyes, but also understanding. "And love. Real, unconditional love." "Yes," he said firmly. "It's over. Kim, Nate, all of it, that's the past. You're my future, Chloe. You and the life we're building together." Chloe smiled, leaning in to kiss him softly. "Good, because I got some news." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Chloe's grin widened. "Remember that socially responsible tech initiative we've been working on? Well, I just got word. We've secured full funding. We're go for launch." Rylan felt a genuine smile spread across his face. This was what mattered. Not revenge, not old wounds, but creating something meaningful, something that could make a real difference. "Partner," he said, pulling Chloe close, "I think we've got work to do." As they bent over Chloe's laptop, excitedly discussing plans for their new venture, Ryland felt a sense of peace settle over him. He'd walked through fire, faced his demons, and come out stronger on the other side. Kim, Nate, the pain of the past, all of it faded into insignificance compared to the bright future ahead. He'd learned his lesson, paid his dues, and now it was time to truly live. Epilogue. Months later, Ryland sat in his home office, sipping coffee as he scrolled through the morning news. A small item caught his eye: a notice of foreclosure on a small apartment in a rundown part of town. The name on the notice, Kimberly Bowers Cole. For a moment, Ryland's finger hovered over the trackpad, tempted to dig deeper. But then he heard Chloe's laugh from the kitchen, smelled breakfast cooking, and realized he didn't care. Not anymore. He closed the browser window and stood, stretching. It was a beautiful day, full of possibility, and he had far better things to do than dwell on the past. As he joined Chloe in the kitchen, pulling her into a warm embrace, Ryland knew with absolute certainty he'd made the right choice. This was his second chance, his new beginning, and he wasn't going to waste a single moment of it.